Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the John Keim Report wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can find us there as part of Ampire Media, Ampire. Always much appreciated when you tune in. Don't forget, you can read my work on ESPN.com. I have a story up now about something I'm going to talk about in a minute, which is Kliff Kingsbury on the offense. And he didn't use the word frustrated, but clearly he's an offensive coordinator. There has to be a level of frustration, which came across about all the guys missing, including their top receiver, and how that impacts the offense and what it might look like early in the season. Anyways, I'll get to that in a minute. But one thing to keep in mind, the John Keim Report is presented by AAA. So today's practice was, well, I'll get to that in a minute. Let's start with Kliff Kingsbury. Again, I think I'm not going to use the word, he did not use the word frustrated, but I think it's the first real sign of like, hey, this offense isn't going to look a certain way until all these guys are back on the field. Kind of obvious. I've been talking about that. Like, this is one reason it's not just Terry McLaurin missing. It goes beyond that. But he knows that they're not going to look great until all these guys are back on the field. And that's one of the things that came through for Kingsbury. He said, like, basically in a nutshell, he said, when you're missing your top two outside receivers, meaning McLaurin and Noah Brown, your top two guards, meaning Brandon Coleman and Sam Cosmi, it's going to be a work in progress. They need to get those guys back on the field to start gelling as an offense, and then you can start to progress. But it's not going to happen until you're on the field, and they have 3 weeks to do it. That's the level of concern. So it goes beyond McLaurin. But again, I'm certainly going to talk about him. Coleman hasn't practiced since August 2nd. All we know is it's a lower leg. He hobbled off, believe it's a lower leg injury. So we haven't seen him since then. Cosmi obviously rehabbing from his torn ACL. And I know that Dan Quinn said that the opener is not off the table, but it would be, at this point, you'd have to classify it as highly unlikely. But the question will be, does he start on the PU? Does he stay on, does he get activated off the PUP list or not? And if he isn't, then that means it's going to be into the season before he's able to, 4 games, he'll miss 4 games. So, all that. Of course, if he misses those first 4 games, that has an impact on the season as well. So that's the thing that to me has not been decided. Again, you're not going to put him out there for that first game if he hasn't practiced to this point and only gets a couple weeks coming off the injury he did. It all adds up to an offense that has not looked sharp this summer. And it's understandable given those absences. And yes, you want to have depth, but when you have key spots that are missing, again, especially on the outside, like they don't have anybody to duplicate what McLaurin or even Noah Brown can really give them. Noah Brown is a downfield threat as well because of his size, ability to make contested catches. They haven't had anybody who's looked sharp in that role without either one of those guys on the field. So anyways, that's where we see it with Kingsbury. There's certainly some frustration. And even with McLaurin, like we can all say, and even Kingsbury said, like, he can be in meetings, but he's not out there running. He's getting treatment and rehab for the ankle that really is something that's bothered him throughout his career and last season. Let's be honest, like if he's signed to a contract extension, I don't believe he's on the PUP list. So, but he's not doing a whole lot because he is. And so when you get to game speed, like you're going to have to ramp up to get to game speed. It takes a while. And like, this is an offense. McLaurin is always in great shape, but when you haven't been working at a certain level, it's really hard you have to get into quote NFL shape. And that means playing in an offense that runs a lot of no huddle. Hurry up. They were the second fastest offense in terms of, snap, the amount of time elapsed between snaps, behind only Dallas. They ran more than 400 plays. They ran 677 plays of no huddle last year. Second place was Philly at 274. So they run a different style of offense. And it's why Deebo Samuel's trainer, when I talked to him for the podcast a few weeks ago, said that he worked him differently this offseason to get used to this style of offense because it is different. You have to be in. And so if you've missed all of camp, it's going to take a minute to get back up to speed for that. Now, clearly he could go in and help if you get back out there soon, but as much as he did before, do you get winded? How does it play down in the fourth quarter? Do they have to, do some sort of a pitch count early? I don't know. All that stuff is they always say they have a plan, but I think it's why if you're Kingsbury, you need to get that guy and the others back on the field very, very soon to make sure it doesn't start impacting the season opener against the New York Giants. The other part with Kingsbury is he is so big with on-field work. Like if you remember last year, I talked to Austin Eckler about this, talked to others. Eckler said he does more walkthroughs than any coach that he's been around. So he values the on-field work a lot more than classroom. The classroom is great. You've got to learn in there. But if you're not getting it on the field, you're not going to get it. So he values that time out there. And that's something that they haven't had with McLaurin. Bobby Ingram told me that, yes, the success they had with he and Daniels last year can carry over. Excuse me. He said the success from one year to the next does not necessarily carry over, but the work they've put in can. The work they've done in practice can, but you still got to get out there and do it again. And basically, Kingsbury kind of said the same thing. Like, yes, there is a carryover, but you've got to be on the field. It's, as he said, it's time on task and togetherness on the grass. That's how you start to continue to build on that relationship, which was very good and productive last year. So that's why, he believes in the on-field work, which is why when he talked today, like there was more that came out in that presser. Maybe it's not a ton. And I know for ESPN, I have a news story out of that. Maybe some of that is obvious that it's not going to look as sharp without them. But I think it's a guy that's like, hey, they have a real game in 3 weeks, need to be ready. And right now, you can't look at that offense and say they're ready to start the season, especially against the defense in the New York Giants that's going to be really good and strong in areas where this team may have some struggles. And that would be, to me, the offensive line. And I'm less concerned about McLaurin because at some point he will be back. And, he's not, his health will be fine once they get this resolved. Noah Brown, I don't know. I think it's that to me is a troubling one. He hurt his knee in the spring. We haven't seen him out here for a little bit. I know he's doing a lot of rehab, but until he's out in the field and he can stay durable, that's been the knock on him his whole career. But McLaurin will get out there, right? And, but what's it going to look like with the offensive line? When will Cosme be out there? When will Coleman be out there? What level will he be at? He just misses a lot of time. And that's, especially when you're in a new position next to a new guy, that can make a difference. So now, fortunately for them, Wiley's a veteran. Allegretti is a veteran. Those guys know how to prepare, know how to handle it. Is it going to be a terrible drop-off? I don't think so. But you also have these other guys starting for a reason. And, the reason they wanted Coleman in there, they bumped Allegretti out. So the plan isn't to start Allegretti somewhere else. He's filling in somewhere else. So they determined that they wanted someone better at left guard. So now he's over at right guard. Like, again, he's smart. He can do things, but they are backups here for them. So until that's why, and I don't know when that one will get resolved. So that's why I say, like, that's something that definitely is worth watching as much as McLaurin. McLaurin's is something for now and down the road. But again, at some point, if he wants to get paid, he'll be out there. If he wants to build a case for free agency next offseason, he'll be out there like that. You're not going to build a case by sitting out games and by playing, by not practicing, et cetera. So, anyways, I think we're also reaching the point where something has to be done with that situation. Now, again, he's still on the PUP list. At some point, they're going to have to activate him off that. And it's like, okay, now you're either going to go, all right, what are you going to do? And I think we're getting close to that point where they have to make that decision. When do you activate him? And then at that point, do you make him a final contract offer, take it or leave it? Because if you're going to leave it, get back out there, you're under contract, play your way out, and we'll either get franchise tagged or maybe get an extension in the off, or sign a new deal in the offseason, or hit free agency. So I don't think they're going to want to let that continue down to the wire, because I think both sides are at a point where it's like, if they're that far apart, then I think it's going to be hard to close that gap. So you can just here's the last offer, make it a good one, make your last offer, but then you may have to close it down and just like, okay, now get back out here and get going. And so if you want to, you know, and it's funny because like that scenario, I had one former general manager text me like that's exactly the scenario he said he would take in this situation. That's not to blame any sides. It's just to say you got games coming up soon, and if you want, if this team wants to win, and if McLaurin wants to build his case or strengthen his case, then the best way to do that for both of them is to get him back on the field. And how do you do that? Like, and I think this is a way that is possibly the way to do that. Activate him, final offer, go, whether he takes it or not, whether, whatever happens, like now you need to go because you need to get ready for the season. And it's in McLaurin's best interest to do that as well. Like he might still be mad. He might still be frustrated with the whole situation. That's his right. But if you want to build your case, then it's going to behoove him to get out on the field with proper build up. So that way you're not being slowed by anything, right? You're not being slowed. You're not risking injury or you're not off to a slow start because of it. Now you can, if he has a slow start, but a really good finish, okay, that's what people are going to notice. But if you have a slow start and it's kind of sputtering, that's what people are really going to hammer on, right? So I think, you want to get out there and give yourself the best chance possible. And then also that helps your team. And I think that's where we're at the point where we're certainly getting to. He's going to need time to ramp up his activity and work to getting ready for that opener. And again, the New York Giants are going to be a tough opener for them, especially with that matchup against offense defense. This is where the defense has to step up. And I think the defense is going to be massively key early in the season because of all of that. They need that side of the ball to help them as the offense builds up. Now watch what happens. He's going to come back, go 5 for 120, and they're going to score 35 points against Giants. I don't know that that's going to happen because, again, that's a really good defense, and that would be asking a lot. But, so anything can happen. But short of that, when you look at this logically, the defense has to do its part and do, really make that a tight game and, give the ball to Jaden late, right? Because everybody's going to feel good with the ball in his hands. But they have to redevelop that connection. I mean, it was so good last year. I've never seen McLaurin more happy than last spring in the summer, talking about his connection with Daniels and what he felt he had in him. There was a play in training camp last year. It was a back shoulder fade. Maybe you remember this, hearing about it, but it was supposed to be a fade route, but McLaurin left room for the back shoulder. He and Daniels read it properly, both read it the same way, back shoulder, touchdown. McLaurin celebrated with a lot of gusto not just because he scored a touchdown in practice, but because he knew what it meant. He had a guy that he could develop that connection with. And if you want to see them build, you saw it all year, but you want to see them be able to build on that because defenses are going to do different things. It's not, the offense is building on what they did last year, and it's not everything the same. So you've got to get out there. That's why they want him out there. I don't think there's any doubt he wants to be out there. I think in his best vision, he would have had this done and he'd be out there practicing with these guys. So, again, this is to assess blame. It's to say the situation is getting to the point where it has to, one way or another, folks, got to go on. So I think that's definitely where we're at. And a lot of people talking about training camp, and I can't say this has been the most intense camp I've covered. I mean, listen, back in the day before the CBA changed in 2011, it was way more intense every practice. I do think Dan Quinn takes a different approach. I thought he took a different approach last year. It seemed to work out quite well. Is it the same as last year? It's hard to say. Like, I've been asking around, like, is it a little bit easier than last year? I think in some ways, but then in some ways, like last year, there were a lot of practices that were like 75 minutes. I'm like, oh, really? But it worked. And one of the things he's really good at is taking care of veterans. And this is an older team. Despite a lot of young guys in key spots, there's young guys and there's older guys, not a lot of middle class because in part of failed draft picks from the past. Like you miss on multiple first round picks. Like they obviously traded Chase Young. They missed on Jamin, missed on Jahan, missed on Emmanuel Forbes. Those are massive misses. Like, just think if they had hit on those picks, whether it's those players or someone else, because we all know other guys that were available. Let's say they hit on those picks; those guys are still here. Now you have a different sort of roster. But you don't. So now, like with Quinn, he's very big on taking care of guys, which is why a lot of veterans like playing for him. And I think this is one way to do it. I would keep and it's hard to know, like it's hard to draw a lot of conclusions from what this means for the season, because a couple of years ago with Bieniemy, he was a hard ass to them, right? And like, hey, people love that. It didn't work out. The players weren't happy at all, not just because of that, but because of other issues with play calling, with et cetera. It was way beyond just him, how tough he was, but he worked them hard, and it did not pay off. So it's not always about that. A lot of times it's about like quarterback, they have their guy, but you need to get that guy, his guys as well. And I think like that's why I say we're at that position, certainly at that point for sure. Anyway, and I think like when you start looking to Monday night against the Bengals, the starters will play a couple, one series, maybe two. I don't know if they get to that second series. I think it depends on how that first series goes. And then with no joint practice, I'm not sure what they're going to do to make up what would have been a good practice session for them, because they wanted to see more against the Ravens and to try and build off the practice they had against the Patriots. I think that's vital. Now that's a big miss for them. And it's like I said, I do not believe this was their decision at all. So what will they do to compensate and to make sure you give your guys, your starters, some really good work? Because, I think they need it. I think they definitely need it, folks. And again, I go back to with McLaurin, one of the negatives of him not being here, in addition to offense, is guys like Trey Amos and Marshawn Lattimore, like they're not working typically against guys who are going to be the kind of caliber of guys they're going to face in the NFL or this season. So that's why Monday night against the Bengals with Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, very good matchup. Now, I do know, like, it's not like when you're facing those guys in regular season, you're going to have a different mindset. And for some guys like Lattimore, I think like his mindset is get through camp, get your game back, but don't focus as much on the matchup, because you may lose sight of certain things that you want to be doing. Again, it's all about him ramping up and being durable for the season, not necessarily winning or looking phenomenal in a week 2 preseason matchup. But it is a good test, and it's a good test for Amos because it's his first, like Lattimore's played in the league a long time. He understands all this. For Amos, it's a good chance to show, like, then I think his approach might be a little bit differently because it is his first opportunity against this caliber. Now, he did cover Stephon Diggs a couple times in the joint practice. This will be his first chance to cover in a game so receivers like that with a quarterback like Joe Burrow. So good opportunity for them. In terms of the offense, one of the things that with Andrew Wiley playing a lot of guard for Coleman is it's given Josh Conerly a lot more time at right tackle to continue to develop as a starter. And I think you see it. Like, there are definitely some hiccups in his game. There are going to be some mistakes. There are going to be some, plays given up, but you see a comfort level growing, and you can see the movement skills and the way he and like Bates work together, et cetera. In fact, I was watching them early in practice and rolling some B-roll here, just watching them like do some tandem blocking, and also watching guys like, just how the tight ends block, and watching how John Bates comes off the ball and blocks, watching Ben Sinnott, how he blocks, and the praise he received for just his technique and form as a blocker. Now, he was brought here to also help as a pass catching tight end, but as a blocker, I think he can help. But as someone else said, you're not drafting blocking tight ends that high, right? But it is at least he can do that for them. Now he's got to develop as a pass catcher. And so far, like in camp, have we seen a lot of that? Like there's been some spurts, but it's not like you're saying there, oh, okay, there it is. We're not there yet. So he's got more to show there, but as a blocker, looked pretty good. But again, with Conerly, as you can see he moves well in space, and you see that like on screens. I think that's going to be a big thing Monday night. So anyway, just going to be something to watch. And by the way, I will be back on Saturday. They have another practice Saturday. I'll do a wrap up Saturday afternoon. And then on Sunday, I'll be releasing an interview that I have, or conversation I have with one of the team broadcasters and one of the Redskins better linebackers the last 20 years, London Fletcher. So I always like catching up with London, want to get his thoughts on building on success. When guys aren't here, what does he think? What does he see from the defense, et cetera? So it will be a good conversation with London because he's very, very smart. Anyways, folks, and you gold members, I'll be taking care of you guys next week. So again, I'll make an announcement either Saturday or Monday after the game as to which night it'll be. Look, most likely Wednesday or Thursday. So anyway, folks, that's it from me. I appreciate you tuning in, and I will talk to you next time.